including Sonnet 3.7, and it's an attempt to standardize the communication that LLMs do with other systems. Since its release near the end of 2024, it's gotten quite a lot of adoption. In particular, OpenAI has signed on to support the standard, and various SaaS apps and other desktop tools even are bringing support for MCP. The reason that's important, of course, is the utility a protocol can provide really hinges on its network effect, right? If people aren't adopting it, no one's going to use it. So, for example, SD cards were useful because everyone used SD cards. Sony's memory stick, that's a different story. There's plenty of videos that will give you a really deep technical dive into what MCP is. So I'm just going to keep it really high level and go over the key conceptual entities in the MCP framework. The first relevant entity is the MCP Host. This is your LLM-powered app that basically needs context from the outside world, from outside systems, or to interact with those systems, i.e. use them as tools. So Claude Desktop would be an example of an MCP host. The next one is the MCP client. This manages the connection between hosts and servers, which brings us to the MCP server, which is typically a lightweight program that exposes various functionality and actions basically that you can take in that server. To my understanding right now, and I think a lot of us are still wrapping our heads around this, I like to think of the MCP server as basically an API and docs that's sent along to the MCP host, which is your LLM. And this way it gets a single package. It knows what it can use, how to use it, and then the ability to use it as well. So it's an actionable API essentially in the context of an LLM. Now, before we get into the cool new MCP functionality within N8N, I do think it's important to note that MCP is a new protocol and not everyone in the engineering community is happy with it. Which, if we look at the case of microservices, for example, you're never going to get all engineers to agree on something. But the good argument that I've heard essentially was, look, we've got a lot of already well-established protocols for computers to interact with each other. For example, RESTful APIs. So why did we need to go create a new protocol? Which is a fair argument. Nonetheless, it's being adopted across the AI industry. Again, big players are adopting this. The N8N team has added it to make sure that the N8N community can be on the bleeding edge and exploring how these new protocols could help us do more. And I think the big question that we're all asking and we'd love the community help on is, why is MCP not just another REST API? What can MCP allow you to do that we couldn't do before in the context of N8N workflows? And I think that's a perfect segue to jump into the N8N canvas and check out the new MCP server and MCP client nodes within N8N. I'm going to first show you how to use MCP server because it allows your Claude desktop or any other MCP host to access the hundreds of different tools and custom workflows that you can build inside of N8N. I think it's going to be super, super powerful. So from a blank workflow, let's add our first step. Since the MCP server is something that our MCP host is going to consume, in N8N, it's going to be a trigger. So let's search for MCP. And then we see the MCP server trigger in here. Let's click to add that to the canvas. It doesn't have any parameters right now. This isn't beta. We're going to add some of the other things that MCP supports, but the N8N team wanted to get this out, get your feedback on this so we can iterate on it faster for you. So if you do have any feedback.
Beleza, pessoal. Acho que já deu aí. Eu fui no banheiro, voltei. Então, enquanto vocês viram aqui a novidade, que é